Hey skaters, welcome back to the Moxi Skates YouTube channel and the series Welcome to the Streets with Goolie. I am Goolie. In today's episode we're going to be going over frontsides and backsides. For this tutorial, I'm going to be showing how to do frontsides and backsides on a ledge as well as a rail. So this obstacle is called a box or a ledge. This one is a DIY box, so it was built by a friend of mine. And then I will also be demonstrating on a rail, which is behind me, is also a DIY rail. And I will be showing how to do a frontside as well as a backside. For this tutorial, I recommend using slide blocks. Slide blocks are designed to help you with these types of slides and grinds, so I highly recommend those. Some of these grinds are possible without grind blocks, but they're much easier with them. As well as a wheel that's harder than at least a 90A in durometer, just because with frontsides on ledges and boxes specifically, you get a lot of wheel bite, and wheel bite is when your wheels catch too much of the surface that you're trying to grind on, and it makes you stick and doesn't allow you to slide. So harder wheels will allow you to kind of push through that wheel bite a little bit more, so that's why I recommend a harder wheel for this technique. You may also need skate wax. If your piece of equipment that you're using has no wax on it at all, it might be too sticky for you to slide, but definitely test out the surface first to make sure before you apply any skate wax. If you're looking to purchase some skate wax, we'll leave a link in the description below of my company where you can get some of your own. What is a frontside? I'm going to show you an example now so you know what you're going to be learning today. Whenever I teach a frontside, I always start out with the same process. And it's just to get a feel of what it's going to be like when you're actually on the obstacle. So I always recommend standing up on it and really feeling comfortable with being on an edge of the ledge. You could also do this with a friend, and we did do a video of how to do frontsides with a friend, and we will leave that link in the description below as well. But if you are on your own, the first step is going to be just standing up here. So you can go 1 foot at a time and just get a feel for how it is to be up on the ledge. Get a feel for the height of the ledge, get a feel for how the angle is, because most ledges will have an angle to them that you're standing up on. And there are some important things to start working on as you begin your first steps with the ledge. When you start actually sliding, you want to look where you are going, where you want your momentum to go, and not down at your feet. So I try to get everyone to start getting used to looking at the end of the obstacle instead of down at your feet. So when you get up there on the ledge, instead of staring down, you're going to stare where you want to go, which is the end of the ledge. The other thing to do when you're up here is you want to have a wider stance, a little bit wider than hip width apart, because that helps with your stability as well as your center of gravity. You want to have a little bend in your knees, and you can use your arms for balance once you start sliding and balancing. And then you want to look where your momentum is taking you. And the next step of this is trying to work on pulling your toes back. So instead of having your feet down flat on the ledge, which will create a lot of wheel bite, you want to actually try to pull your toes up, actively pull those toes up, so that your slide block is what is making the most point of contact instead of your wheels. I know that's a lot to think about when you're trying to jump on an obstacle that might be new to you and try a new trick. But I recommend drilling this over and over again, because the more used to all of these steps that you are, the more comfortable you will be with the actual trick. The next step is actually jumping on. So a lot of skaters will do the step-on technique, which is stepping on 1 foot after the other for quite some time. But this is actually somewhat dangerous. I think stepping on is okay when you're trying to get the feel for something and you're just learning, but once you get used to the obstacle and you get used to the trick, I really recommend jumping on with 2 feet at the same time, because the 1 foot after the other technique can be dangerous, because your 1 foot could slip out before the other one makes it onto the ledge and will cause you to fall more consistently than if you do it with 2 feet at the same time. Without rolling or rolling, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. But I started out not rolling, just standing in front of the ledge. I began to just hop onto the edge and get comfortable with that hop on, having a nice squat in my legs so I'm comfortable and stable. Making sure that when you jump on, your power is coming from your legs, so you have a nice squat before you push off. So the power comes through your legs and shoots out your feet, and you flick off the toes to get onto the ledge. When you land on the ledge, you have a little bend in your knees for stability, and when you jump off the ledge, you want the same thing. You want to have a nice bend to absorb the impact as you land. Your landing isn't as important right now, but you can come off either forward, or you can come off fakie, or you can come off just straight back the way that you came on. Whatever you feel comfortable with until you start to progress and can move on to the next steps. Once you're comfortable with that, the next step would be to start jumping on from your body being either completely parallel to the obstacle or at a slight angle. Starting out at a slight angle is going to be a little bit easier, but I find when you practice this parallel, it gets your body used to having to jump and rotate, because when you're actually approaching the ledge to make a slide, you're not going to be coming on to the obstacle forward. You're going to be coming at it from an angle like this so that your momentum carries you. So you want to start practicing jumping on while your body is faced the direction you'll actually be rolling, and there is going to be a little bit of a rotation to it, but you just want to look where your feet are going to be planted and then immediately look where your momentum is going to go, as we already discussed. But start getting used to having to rotate a little bit into your jump. Once you're comfortable with that, then you're going to want to start to roll a little bit and add speed so that you have some momentum to actually create a slide. The more momentum you have, the longer your slide will be, and the less momentum you have, the shorter your slide will be. So don't be discouraged if you're just starting out and you're only getting a couple inches of a slide or even a foot or so when you're starting out, because that's perfectly normal. It's better to feel really comfortable with the foot placement and the muscle memory and build up a strong foundation of the trick before you're just flying into it with a lot of momentum. You might notice that when I do a front side, sometimes my foot turns a little bit to the inside, so it's more on an angle than it is flat. And that is perfectly normal and okay as well. Some people will do front sides with their feet completely flat, and some people will do them with their feet turned inward. For me, as I learned over the years, turning my feet inward just made this slide a little bit easier for me, but some people prefer their feet to be flat. So that's completely up to you and whatever makes you feel most comfortable doing this trick. Now, what can go wrong? I don't want to scare you from not trying this trick or add any fear to you, but I just want to tell you that no matter what your skill level is at, sometimes things just go wrong. We all make mistakes, and sometimes even if a trick that we've practiced 1,000 times still doesn't go 100% the way that we wanted it to, it's perfectly okay. So with the front side, some of the common issues that I see or things that can happen is either you will accidentally catch your toe stops because you didn't fully jump onto the edge of the ledge, so you misjudged a little bit where you wanted to plant your feet and you actually land onto a toe stop instead of landing onto the block. And what could happen if you hit your toe stop is usually it'll just send you forward, or it'll kind of send you over to the side. It's typically easy to catch yourself if that happens, but happens to me from time to time, and it's okay if it happens to you. Just be cautious that this is possible. Another common thing that could happen is slip out. So if your body weight is leaning too much this way or too much this way, or if you had your feet too close together, your feet could slip out from underneath you and you can go one way or the other. And then typically you'll just fall on your side. So these are things to watch out for. And this is why it's so important to get your foundation of your feet placement and your absorption and jumping on with 2 feet, so that way you have a really strong foundation going into this trick. Now moving on to the rail, the technique is actually going to be very much the same. So I'm not going to go over too much of it because it is very much like doing the ledge front side, except there are some minor differences, and most of it is just about weight placement and things to be aware of. A common mistake I see when people are trying to learn front sides on a rail is that their weight placement is a little too far forward, which makes them come off the rail too early. What's important with the rail is making sure you really have a nice bend in your legs to keep your weight more centered and stable and not too far forward, as well as doing that toe lift that we talked about earlier, because that will also kind of help you stay back. But I also, when I skate rails personally, I try to pretend like it is a ledge and that I can't go over. So I'll pretend like the rail itself is that edge of the ledge and that I have to stay on the edge and I can't go over, and that will sometimes help me stay on the back of the rail instead of forward, and you can stay on a little bit longer that way. I know when I first started learning to jump on rails, I was really scared that I was going to completely miss the rail, and I didn't understand how your brain and your body could just magically know where to jump. But it usually does, and especially if you get used to standing up on the rail and jumping up on the rail and getting that strong foundation, then usually it just starts to happen with muscle memory. I also find rails to be a little bit slicker than ledges for the most part, depending on how much it's waxed or what kind of ledge or rail that it is. But for the most part, rails tend to be a little bit slicker. So it's really important to get used to the material and see how it feels before you jump on for the first time to make sure it feels safe enough for you, that it's not too slick if you're just starting out, and that you're comfortable with the surface you're jumping onto. Moving on to the backside, I'm going to go over this one pretty quickly because we have a lot to cover in this series, and the techniques for doing a backside are quite similar to a front side, except for the direction of your body and the rotation. A front side is called a front side because the front of your body is facing the obstacle, and a backside is going to be the opposite. So when you get onto the obstacle, your back is actually going to be what is facing the obstacle. When I was doing a front side, I was on this side, rotating so that I was like this. With a backside, I'm on the opposite side, or I would just be coming from the other direction, and I'm rotating so that I'm like this. I'm kind of approaching it from a way that I'm going to be rotating, and the heels of my feet are now going to be pulling up a little bit to make the slide happen instead of my toes. You want to get used to standing up on the obstacle in a backside. So instead of your feet being forward, they're now going to be more towards the back, and your heels are going to be lifted instead of your toes. And you still want to look at the end of the obstacle. You still want to have a nice bend in your knees and squatting to lift off and to absorb the landing. But the rotation is just a little bit different. Backsides can be a little bit more difficult just because you are kind of a little bit more blind towards the obstacle instead of looking right at it the whole time like a front side. But it is very much similar, and you just have to get used to that muscle memory of jumping on with that rotation. Well, that concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed these tutorials. These two tricks are extremely important and very foundational, so please drill these. They will come in handy as you start to build up your toolbox of tricks. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video in the series, Welcome to the Streets with Goolie.